Okay, so good morning and welcome everyone to our Connect event today, which is all about the subject of devolution, specifically a devolution deal for Devon. Now, devolution is all about the transfer of powers and fundings from national government to local government, and it's really significant because it enables decision making to be made by those closest to our communities as opposed to from individuals sat at a distance in Whitehall. And having greater economy and control over the decisions that affect our community means hopefully we can achieve better service delivery, improved infrastructure, and a stronger economy because we can tailor solutions that meet our community's needs effectively rather than the one size fits all approach that can often arise through national approaches. And I also believe that devolution provides us with greater opportunities for collaboration. We can get councils, businesses, and community groups engaging together effectively. Hopefully, we can all deliver better outcomes for our communities. So a devolution deal could potentially provide, provides great potential for achieving positive change here in Devon. And I'm now delighted to be welcoming Phill Adams, who is the programme lead for the devolution deal and works at Devon Council. And hopefully he's going to be able to answer all of your questions around what is devolution, what's the background, where has this come from, why do we want a deal in Devon, and what are we hoping to get from this deal? Now, Phil's going to be sharing some slides with us. We'll then open up the virtual room for comments and questions, and I'd really welcome you to share your perspectives on the deal and how you would like to see parish and town councils engaged in the topics of the deal and the outcomes you're hoping to find for your communities. So hopefully that's what everyone's signed up for. I'm now going to hand over to Phill to talk to us about the deal. Over to you, Phill.
Thanks, Cara. Yeah, and good morning, everyone. As I say, I think this way that we're going to run this morning is we've got some slides, but actually I'm really interested in getting questions and talking to members around the room about some of the things coming forward. The health warning I would give as we get into this is that devolution's a work in progress, and we're not quite there yet. There'll be some interesting things, which I'll talk about in a minute. But actually, this is something where we're working with partners on it and it's evolving as we go. And we're really keen to hear from you as we go through. So I'm going to try and keep my slides quite short. But I am aware that for some, devolution might be quite a new thing and you're not quite sure what it means and what it's all about. So what we've done for this morning, and I am just going to try and share my screen to make sure that we can do this. And Cara, if this is not working, I apologise in advance.
All right, I've got slides to stand by if you need me to help.
So, share. I'm hoping you can see that.
Yes, we can see that.
That's great, thank you. Right, so what I'll do is I'll give a bit of a brief run through about where we are, what devolution's all around and all about, and sort of where we've got to. And then, yes, as I said, it'd be great to hear from members. So just in terms of my role, I'm Phill Adams. Day to day, I'm actually one of the economy team over at Devon, but for this one, I'm leading on the devolution project. And I've been working with government alongside the chief execs, leaders, and various other partners for about the last 18 months around this. So this is something that we've been working on for a while now, but we are now slowly getting there. I mean, just in terms of where this comes from, so this is a long-standing ambition that we've had across the Southwest. It's something that we've wanted to do, from 2014, I've said, but actually pretty much for the last 25 years. We all know that we're better when we do things locally. Generally, things get delivered in a more effective way, they're more focused on our communities, and we see better outcomes when it's not being done from Whitehall. We've kind of been pushing for a long time from political leadership at officer level across all of us to say to government, give us more control over the things that count for our local communities. And where we've always come unstuck is that the discussion around devolution, about pushing powers down from Whitehall, has always been linked to governance. There's always been this thing around, there's no way we can move this forward. The last 8 years in particular, and we've had about 3 sequences of this where it's been stop-start, it's always fallen over because of the mayor. Basically, as many members around the room will know, the mayor has always been the thing that's triggered devolution, whether there's sort of Andy Burnham or others around the country, the Manchester model, the West Midlands model, that idea that the only way that you can get stuff from Whitehall is if you've got a single mayor controlling, upwards of 1.5 million people. And for us, we've always said that just doesn't work. We are a very diverse area. I don't have to say that to people on the call. We have very different political views, big, little p, community views, it's never going to be easy to bring that community together under a single individual. And you could say the same about other areas, but in some ways we are so diverse and so large that it's a much bigger challenge in sort of Devon and its surrounding area than it is in the likes of West Midlands, where there is already some sense of a sort of conurbation unity. So that was where we were. In 2021, where we got to was that government started to shift its position under the Johnson administration. And there started to be this conversation about, couldn't we have a mayor, couldn't we have a devolution without a mayor? And the ministers had slowly shifted. That crystallised in sort of early 22, when government suddenly came back to us and said, no, we're comfortable that you can now have a discussion about devolution without a mayor. You'll still need to have some kind of governance, but we're comfortable that we can work with you as local authorities. And we basically were asked, do we want to take part? And we said yes, straight away. We weren't alone though there. And just to give members around the room a sort of feel, this is a process that's been going on everywhere in the country. It's a discussion that's going on with every upper tier and district around the country around where we go next. 10 areas have already got devolution. You'll know them. They're big names. They're starting to see more and more about them. But the white paper that came forward in 2021 announced sort of 9 other areas, 6 areas that were going to be mayoral deals, and they were big and shiny, and they were the next round of Manchester's, and then 4 of us that were going to be these sort of non-mayoral combined authorities, which I'll come on and talk about what that looks like. And we've been working around that ever since. Now, it's been interesting over the last 6 months in that model, that sort of mayoral model, has really started to fall apart in a lot of areas. Various areas originally agreed that they would move it forward, but actually what we've seen on the ground is places like Cornwall and Norfolk have found it really difficult to deliver a mayor, that single state of agreement. So where we've got to with most places, and it's what we're seeing around the country now, is that places are coming together as consortia of councils, local councils, and saying, no, we don't want a mayor. We've got our leadership. We've got our existing status quo. We've got the ability to deliver this as existing partners. And that's pretty much where government is as of today. What we'll see over the next few weeks, and I'll talk about the timetable in a minute, is almost a fleet of devolution deals led by local partners. It won't be the sort of mayoral models that you've seen in the past. So where are we as Devon? So this is about moving powers down from London. It's about moving powers down from agencies which sit outside of our patch. We are looking for a non-mayoral deal, which would be led by the county council and by the unitary councils, working with the districts and wider partners. And we'll talk about how DALC and the wider local councils fit into that. It wouldn't have an elected mayor. It would bring us together in a new partnership, which would do the delivery piece, and that'd be called the Combined County Authority. But that is very much a creature of us. It would be us working together in the same way a joint committee or another structure works together. It would bring together the local authority partners to deliver pieces. This is not a super council. It's not a new administration. It's not taking over anything that we already do. This is basically just us coming together to give government a vehicle to work with to deliver some of the activity that it delivers for us. And why do we want it? I mean, most of us will be able to answer this ourselves, but basically we know we don't perform as well as we should around certain things: productivity, employment, housing, community development. These are areas where we don't get our fair share at times. We don't deliver them as well as we could. And there's numerous things in the way from a national level that stop us from doing more. And, the more that we see around the country devolution taken forward, where local people are making local decisions, it's become clear that that is the gap that we've got. We are not able to influence funds and some of the powers that come from the centre in the way that other areas now can. That's what's driving devolution locally. It's an opportunity to really make a difference on the things that count: skills, housing, economic development. So that's the sort of background. Where we've got to is that we've been working with government on an offer, and it's been worked up, as I say, over the last 18 months, but with the last 5 months in particular being the real discussion point. And where we're getting to is that they're going to make us an offer at some point over the next few weeks, and I'll leave it there, around probably 5 or 6 core things. So it's going to be devolution of adult education funding, so things like GCSE maths and English for adults based in your communities, because we deliver that on the ground. At the moment, it's run from Whitehall, and all of a sudden we'll have a say in how that money's spent and where we focus. It will give us additional say over things like housing, working with Homes England. So if you know the housing sort of side, Homes England at the moment have got a national programme where they make decisions in Bristol or in Whitehall. We'd be working with them around how those decisions are made, and we'd get more say in how housing money is spent locally, and that's the billions that are in the affordable housing programme. Local enterprise partnerships. So if you know anything about economic development and the business side, at the moment that's run through a board which is set up and reports directly to Whitehall. It would be devolved down to the local authorities working in partnership, and we would run it with our partners over the next few years. There's other things going on around the LEP, but actually that is a bit of a move. It's the first time that it will have been delivered at a Devon level rather than a regional or national level. There's some capital money in there around investment in things like housing and net zero and stuff for communities, which we're working through. That includes potentially some stuff around community housing projects, which I won't go into too much detail, but it's quite exciting potentially for us. We'd be looking at things like the Shared Prosperity Fund. The current programme is due to end in 2025, but the next programme, whatever comes after the election, would be delivered through the Combined Authority, and the partners of the authorities will be bringing that forward. And it also includes transport, and it includes investment, but also some joint working around transport. And we'll go into the detail at a later time, but effectively we'd be working much more closely as the transport authorities together around how we align things like public transport and some of our transport planning approaches. And there's a couple of other things, stuff around culture and tourism and innovation that we're sort of talking about. Tourism in particular is moving at pace, and there's some work that we're doing with the tourist boards at the moment around how we work together on that. That'll all come into the purview. Overall, it's about 30 to 50 million pounds worth of activity a year. It sounds like a lot, but actually in the grand scheme of the local authorities and sort of how much we spend across us all and how much we spend as partners, it's not massive, but it's a starting point. And the way to look at this with devolution is it's working together to get the first bits. As we've seen elsewhere, the way that this normally works is you get your first tranche and you get your first set of powers, and then you build, working with your local partners, out from there. So that's the kind of crux of it. So the bit that you might be more interested in, what's the role for DALC and the local councils? Well, we've always said, and John Hart and leaders have always said, they're very keen to make sure that devolution wasn't just about changing the debt chairs. It's very easy to replace a regional or national agency with another quasi-agency that just sits above us all. It's got to be about having that stronger local voice and input and making sure that we are part of the governance and decision-making. We've been talking about that for quite a number of months. So Cara and others around the call have been involved in parts of that. But what we've been looking at is how we build on what we've been doing through Team Devon. Post-COVID, during COVID, we had that period where we worked very closely together from county to district to local, making sure that we'd got those kind of relationships. It didn't always work. There's always challenges, but actually it set the tone for how we'd want to work going forward. It makes sense that things need to be delivered at in that sort of mechanism. So in designing the governance for devolution, we've been thinking about how we do that. How do we make sure there's a meaningful role in there? And there's a couple of things that we've already agreed and that we're looking to move forward. One is within Devon, putting in place a formal joint committee of which DALC would be a member to start to talk about how we work as Devon. So as part of the combined authorities approach, its Devon membership will be tied into a formal committee that it discusses and sets Devon's position. There is some stuff to work through and how that works in practice, but it'd be the first time that we've got something like that actually formalised for the Devon County area where we come together. It's not a unitary council. It's not about changing the way we work. It's not about taking away powers. This is about really having something formal as a partnership where we can do stuff together in a way that we've never done before. Alongside that, we're also looking at how we include both local council partners and wider community partners in the sub-governance of all of the stuff that the CCA does. So to give you a feel, we're going to have subcommittees and stuff working around housing and economic development and business. And the discussion that's going on at the moment is how do we make sure that we've got representation and clarity around places, around communities, and around local councils and VCS partners. There's a big bit of work going on at the moment about how we design those things, because it's got to work and it's got to be better than the system that it's replacing. So that's all work in progress, but just to give you a feel, it's really important. The other piece that's probably worth knowing as well is, unlike some of the systems that's come before, this is all subject to public scrutiny. So if we do move ahead with the partnership, and we do move ahead with the devolution deal, it will have the kind of public scrutiny committee and the public scrutiny sort of arrangements that we've seen in other mayoral areas. There will be those moments where leaders will be able to be challenged over it. There will be input, and there will be committees where people will be able to sit around the table and for the first time open to public scrutiny on how spend works. And that's a bit of a shift for us, and we're thinking about how it's going to work, but it will give opportunities for members to be more involved in actually scrutinising how spend goes forward, which on things like economic development and housing, we've never been there before. So it's going to be interesting. So that's kind of where we are. That's the sort of overview. We're working on the final text at the moment. The way that this process works is that we agree something in principle with government. They then present it back to us, and then we go out on a formal consultation. This isn't around us just signing it off and it being a done deal. This is very much around we are presented with something, and then we go and talk to our members, to the public, to businesses, to communities around what we've been offered, and we'll have to go through a formal 6 to 8 week consultation process to see whether or not the public want to do it. Because it's not a mayor, it doesn't include things like a referendum. So I know that I always get that question, but just to burst that one and just to deal with it, this is not about a public vote. This is purely about, we have been offered X and we have to set up a partnership to do it. What do we think? And that's the way it will work. If we like it, and if there is public support and there's member support and there's council support for it, we'll move forward with a business case that goes to the Secretary of State. Secretary of State signs it off, and then the intent would be that the new partnership, the combined authority, would be set up around July, sort of August next year. Obviously, there's some elections and potential things that might happen next year, but we've spoken to all sides, and their intent is that they want to move forward with this, which is good. And then we would move forward and start to draw the powers down from Whitehall, and we'd be into that discussion about how it works day to day, which is, you know, exciting. But a lot of work to do before we get there. Consultation to go through, got a whole piece around finalising the text, and as we always say, there is no devolution deal until there's a deal. So that was all I was really going to say for this moment. We're working on this, it's been moved through, we're trying to keep partners up to speed. We're always happy to have these conversations, and I've said to Cara and others, always happy to come along and talk to people. But this morning was really just to give you the same insight that district members and others have had over the last few weeks about where we are. And apologies we didn't cover it off at the conference, because I know that there were some people around the room that wanted us to do it. But yeah, time, because of some of the other things we're doing as the county council, sort of took away. And I'll pause there for questions, if that's okay, Carl.
Thank you so much, Phil. Now, I've obviously seen this presentation a number of times now, but this is the first time that our members have probably seen this level of detail before. So I really want to open up the floor now to hear from you. I mean, how is this landing with you? How does this feel like this is a positive step forward for Devon? Do you have any concerns over some of the content that you've heard? We really want you to share your perspectives on here and what you're hoping to see change as a result of the devolution deal. And Phil will be able to answer all of your questions, I'm sure. So over to you. And can I say, can we either use the raise hand icon or type your question in the chat if you prefer to do it that way? And please, can you introduce your council name as well as your name when you speak? First up, Janine.
Hiya. I don't know why I appeared twice in the meeting. So I'm Janine Gardner from Cranbrook Town Council. And I was wondering whether there's any direct relevance for local councils. So the list of potential areas, which Phil very kindly presented, appears to relate to upper tier authorities in the main. So yeah, is there any direct responsibility, direct funding, direct service provision, and so on for local councils? Thank you.
So I think a lot of it, as a starting point, is going to be around some of those bigger upper tier authority powers, and I think it's fair. I think the one area that there is probably more relevance is going to be around the Shared Prosperity Fund and around some of the community and sort of local activity piece, which is areas where, and it depends on your district, you're already working as groups around certain projects. That's the bit I think immediately that you'll start to see. The thing I would say though is what we've seen here is that it's where activity starts then to leak down afterwards. So things like local community development projects, employability, work clubs, stuff like that, as well as local investment in things like town centres and regeneration, they're the areas where I think it's just worth being aware, because things move over time. But as a start of 10, it's probably the shared prosperity fund stuff that's going to be the most, the thing that you will notice first as local councils. Then maybe other things that start to come through, where you start to see the combined authority being a bit more involved.
I think Janine also picks up on an issue that I think I've picked up from other councils before, that when powers are getting devolved down to from central down to local to county, that inevitably might have more pressures on county, which might then filter down to things getting dropped down to district. Do you see any, from what we've learned from other areas, any other trends that might suggest that things might get pushed down further? There might be different devolution, because we know the districts and councils are going to be maintaining their current functions. But is there a trend that this supports even further devolution, I suppose?
I mean, we've seen a little bit of it. The challenge we've got is we're one of the first ones where, with our sort of geography, where we've got that sort of town and parish sort of community, in a way that, because a lot of it's been urban, so there has been borough and sort of town level, parish level sort of devolution, but we're the first one really where you've got that extra geography. North East, you've had it a little bit. West Yorkshire, you've had it a little bit, but actually it's going to be slightly different in Devon. And I think we've got some opportunities around that, about making the case that certain things, I mean, regeneration in particular, and we all know it, your communities better at times than any of us. And there is a real need for us to be better at having those conversations and engaging with local councils around how this stuff. I know, having been at a district council, if I went and spoke to my parish or town councils, they've got very strong views and very good ideas about what works. And sometimes we needed to listen to them more. So there's something in there, Cara. But as you know, it's how we design it in. That's the challenge over the next few months. And I think it's a fair challenge back to us as an organisation and as individuals, pushing us to say, where's the local voice? I think it's really important that we don't lose that through this process. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So for clarity for everyone here, and for reassurances, there's going to be opportunities for greater collaboration and closer working. There's not necessarily going to be things forced down. That's not what the goal of a devolution deal is.
No.
Yeah.
No,
thank you.
Absolutely not.
Thank you. Janine, did you want to come back on that one? Go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you for bearing with me, everyone. So I note, Phill, that you talked about the Shared Prosperity Fund in your slides. And so you talked about the Shared Prosperity Fund and other place-based investments. But I was just wondering whether you can explain a little bit more about what that Shared Prosperity Fund is and what it might fund, please.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know, and members around the phone may know more, but just to give you an oversight. So the Shared Prosperity Fund is the replacement for what was the European funding. So if you knew about European social funds or European regional development funding, when we left the EU, the government introduced a local fund for community development, for regeneration, for skills and people, and for local projects. It's held by the districts in Devon, it's held by Torbay and Plymouth councils in their geographies, and they've got a 3-year funding parcel which they have to go out to the community and ask for bids for. That's funding at the moment a range of community and regeneration projects across the area. Individual areas will have a different level of capacity to be working with it, but we know that in some areas, towns and parishes have been working with partners around sort of funding projects. That's the one where that sort of community level funding, which DLUC's released, is going to be the one where most immediately you work with your local partners. And I think different districts have taken different decisions about how they do that. It's everybody's individual choice. But I think one of the important things that we've got to push back from government is important that bottom-up project sort of approach is in there. I think I'd raise it because that's the one that's probably closest to each of you in terms of where the money gets spent. If you're not aware of SPF, it's worth just doing a bit of investigating. I don't want to land our district colleagues in it, but it is something that's out there at the moment. And it's something that they've done various funding rounds and gone out to partners to say, have you got a project? Tends to be projects of between 100 and 150,000 rather than the micro level stuff, but it's worth exploring if you haven't actually seen it before. So yeah.
I'll try and share some information about the Shared Prosperity Fund. I appreciate there are district differences is on the types of topics that they're prioritising. So there again is the opportunity of how do we influence what they're prioritising, isn't it?
Yeah.
So next question is Liz Brooks Hocking.
Morning, Phill.
Morning,
thank
Liz.
you for your presentation. I'm just interested in pursuing how you're going to be able to approach this large piece of work which you mentioned as being ongoing, as setting up the governance of what is the structure by which you will make sure that local voices are actually heard.
Yeah.
So one, I think that's always challenging for all of us. We all struggle to get through to our communities sometimes. So I know how difficult it is from the level at which you're working. But one thing we all know is that doing that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. My question to you actually is: have discussions happened at your level to do with how well resourced you are to carry out that work?
Yes. Yes, they have. Would I, and I think, I'm happy to be frank about it. Would we like to be in a position where we had a ton of resource to be able to go and do this as in the most comprehensive way we possibly can? Yeah. Have we got some resource in place to able to do the piece of work? We have enough now, and the authorities have been working together and the districts to think about how are we going to work together on this? How do we resource it? I mean, in terms of the governance, going back to the first point, so the way that this will work in practice is, and this all flows out of the Act. So the Act was adopted by government about 2 weeks ago. And if anybody's really interested, it's on the website. You can read about how it all fits together. The way it works is that we have to create a panel of 10 members. And we've said this in the public domain, so it's not new. It will be the 2 local authorities. It will be representatives from the districts. It will be a business voice and an education voice. But underpinning that in Devon, there is also a joint committee, a formal local government committee, which will have the 8 districts, the county council and DALC and the national parks on it. How, and Liz, this is where I'm sort of looking to you guys, how that representation for DALC is going to work on that joint committee obviously will be a decision for the association. But what we're trying to do through that is act as a pivot point. In terms of the wider committees, we're having a discussion at the moment about how membership is going to work, and you're absolutely right. I mean, my team, we've got 3 or 4 of us from across various authorities working together on how we co-design this. And as we get into some of that, we'll be looking to pull other people in, including yourselves, to have a conversation about this is where the thinking's got to. Part of the challenge we've had around all this is that we'd really love to get into the detail, but we're waiting for government to do the basic bit, which is, can we have a deal first before we've really got into the nuts and bolts of how it will work day to day. And it's going to take us about 6 months to get this to a point where we're actually ready to go. So we've got a bit of time. So that's a long answer to say, we're looking to work with you around this. We've already identified some formal points at which you will be a member around the table. And on the resourcing point, yes, we've got enough, but it's going to take some focus. And that's something that, I'll be honest, we haven't got a lot of capacity across any of us at the moment. We all know that, but it's something we're just going to have to prioritise because it's important, I think, is where we're getting to.
Okay, can I just come back on that quickly and say, I think a lot of our members will be very keen that DALC plays a formative role in all this.
Yeah.
And one thing I note from all my consultations with local authorities or our own communities or whatever is that if you identify rigidly particular points where you think, oh, that's an opportunity for to draw somebody else in or to consult or whatever, what's really critical is that DALC is kept up to speed with what your thinking is as you go along, so that if we come to a point where we think actually they're heading in completely the wrong direction here or they're missing an opportunity, we would really like to be able to contribute at that point rather than at set intervals that might be compromised if you are actually as far as we're concerned, going off in the wrong direction. So I'm just asking for us to be kept fully informed.
No, absolutely. And one of the reasons, and Cara, you know, the reason why we've been quite keen to make sure that you're in the loop is for exactly that reason. Is no, understood. I mean, you know, there's always moments, and we all know. So I'm not going to try and pretend they don't happen, where things don't quite work out the way that we wanted. But on this one, we're trying to do our best. If it's not working, let us know. That is purely where we are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
If I'd also add to that, I mean, Phil's highlighted that, you know, that we'll have a role here. We will be advocates for our sector. So it's up to our members to also hold us accountable and have a say in how they want to see that do as well. So yeah, so I think not for conversation necessarily for today, but as these conversations develop, we need to be working with our members to make sure that we represent you effectively as well. I welcome those challenges in the months to come. The next question was from Ruth Pearson-Bunn.
So, thank you very much, Phil, for the presentation, and I'm beginning to come up to speed. As a sort of long in the tooth civil servant and district and county level worker as well, I could just groan and say more bureaucracy then, usual power balance, voting structures possibly at the top, influence structures at the bottom, and our core customer, people in the street, will they just say more of the same? How are we going to demonstrate that we're nimble, listening, making a difference, to make this appear at least to be a success, rather than the usual suspects making all the decisions as they always have?
Yeah, so we are doing what we, so first off, Ruth, and you know, so I'm not even going to try and pretend, we have to work within the guidance and the rules that we get given by our friends in Whitehall. And as ever, there's a certain structure that they like, which is we only really want to speak to one person. We don't want flexibility. What we want is for the world to be a very simple place. We're pushing back on that. So part of that is, yes, we can help you with that, and we can hide the wiring, but we've got to have the ability to shape it so that we can do some of that bottom-up piece. And that's part of the process we're going through. I mean, one of the reasons why we're doing today, and one of the reasons why we've been having the discussions over the last few months, is exactly that. It needs to be nimble. It needs to be something where we can clearly demonstrate what the benefit is for the person on the street. You know, let's take housing, because housing's one that we all talk about. You know, if we're really going to get something from government around housing, it's got to be better and more community focused, and have the ability for local communities to input into some of the funding coming forward than this current way it works. Because there's no point in doing it otherwise. It's, you know, if we're just replacing Homes England with a faceless gang of officials who are going to sit in, I won't say Exeter, let's say Newton Abbot. God, I'll be excited. You know, just making decisions about, you know, housing. What difference does that make to any of us, including myself? You know, so I think where we've got to, and this is certainly the discussion we've been having with leaders and around the patch, is that this has got to work in a way where it's actually giving us some ability to shape those things. I mean, if it's just replacing one set of bureaucrats with another, there's no point in doing it. And actually, what we've seen around the country, and I know that people are going to be a bit cynical about it, is where this has worked, like Manchester, like Birmingham, it has its challenges, but they have seen more local impact and more ability to shape the way that the cities do business. And I think what we're saying as Devon is we want that ability. It won't be perfect, but it will give us more of the ability to do stuff for the people that count. Let's see. But I think there is a challenge in there, and we all know it. It's working through now how we get that right. And part of today and other things that we're doing is around trying to make sure that we're designing this in a way that works. That said, we start from working with Whitehall, and that's, as ever, it always comes with a certain amount of, you know, drag factor. So, yeah.
So could I just follow on by saying,
Yeah.
so you know what works out there.
Yeah.
Do you have a fave model, perhaps for the influence end of things rather than the top level decision making? So the input end, what would you like to, if you had your magic wand, what would you like to put in at the sort of bottom end of the influencing process?
I mean, what I'd like is place-based sort of organisations that we can work with. You know, and if you if you talk to anybody in any of the authorities, if we had the resources, we would like placed, focused, bottom-up delivery approaches for a lot of stuff. Because we know that if I'm working, I'll talk about it. If I'm working in Ilfracombe, it's very different from working over in Newton or working over in Tavy, or, we know that local communities know what works for them. And you would have a place-based function where we would have budgets which you were able to influence and say, right, this is what we think we need within our local place. Why can't we do it? And if Donna was here as chief exec, she would say the same over on the county council level. In an ideal world, that place-based approach would be the way that we would do business. And local councils are one of the key partners in that, alongside district colleagues, because you understand your places better than those sitting in County Hall in the sort of faceless piece. It's not to say my colleagues aren't reactive to place, but it's just that we all know that that's the way the world is. We're working on that. The challenge with it is the resources that you need to do it, and making the brave decisions about moving resources around to get to that point. So yeah, no, understood. But yeah, which is why I can't promise it, but we all know how we'd want to do it if we could.
Good. More power to your elbow, Phill.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth.
And these are the kind of things that we're going to have to be flagging when we respond to the consultation. When the consultation comes out, it's highlighting how we want those clear terms of engagement for our. The next question, I believe, was from Julie.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And yeah, thank you, Phill, for your presentation. My question is as well around particularly sort of funding and staff. It was both for thinking about the actual combined authority itself, in that how that'll be funded, but equally the any powers that come down to town and parish, which should probably, I think, by most would be welcomed. However, I'm very much aware that towns and parishes wouldn't necessarily have the staffing infrastructure to deliver on those ambitions. So my question really is the funding and the staffing then also going to be cascaded down to match these ambitions?
I mean, I think where we've got properly devolved activity, it has to be. And so I'll give you a feel for where we are as the county council and where the districts are. Our starting point on this is this cannot be about just passing stuff to us without the ability to deliver it. We need the money and the facilities to do it. We've made a big case throughout this that actually we're happy to take on the bureaucracy that Ruth's just spoken about, but you have to give us the resources to actually deliver that. And similarly, we couldn't be in a position where we asked others to do stuff unless they've got the resources to take it forward. Now, I'm not saying that that's not going to be always, it's always going to be perfect, because it's not. As we know, there's always some strings attached. But where we're getting to with government is that understanding that, powers without funding is a no. We're not going to be taking stuff unless there is a decent balance there. And I think as local councils, if there are things that are being devolved down, I think you should be saying the same. And quite rightly, we shouldn't be doing that. Now, I have to wear my county council hat here and say there are always difficult choices to be made. And sometimes that's not the way it works. But I think on the devolution piece in particular, we're certainly all saying the same thing, which is nothing. To give you a feel, there is some funds in there to do the bureaucracy piece of it, the sort of management. The way it's working in practice is as the funds get devolved down, government is making a saving effectively on the officials that were delivering it before. We're asking that some of that resource, not all of it, because we think we can do it for less than they're doing it for, is passed down to the local area so that we can administer it. And so far they've said, yeah, that's fine. Interestingly, we can deliver this stuff a lot cheaper than our colleagues in Whitehall. It's been amazing seeing the budgets they put in place for administration on things that actually they shouldn't be spending that amount of money. So, but yeah, there'll be more details on that as we get into the deal itself, I think.
Thank you. So there could potentially be employment opportunities within this as well at a more local level for people to, yeah.
Yeah, and it depends on the individual funds that come down. We're just working through some of the detail, but certainly on some of the early stuff, like I'll take the adult education budget, we would be taking over the administration of that. And we already know that we're going to have some individuals employed. They will be paid for by the programme coming down. And actually, we don't need some of the overheads that they've been spending in Whitehall on it, because we've got some of that as local authorities already. So, yeah, and there'll be other things as well. Yeah.
Okay, so do you perceive that the actual combined authority itself would be run out of County Hall, as in the physical location, or do you perceive that, because thinking of premises and all the rest of it, practical things like that.
So it's a really good question. It's one that we're discussing at the moment, and I'm not going to avoid it. We are trying not to have the sort of big glass office that one or two of the others mayors have got. Members are really clear that actually, why do we need that? We've got County Hall, we've got Plymouth, we've got Torbay, we've got the districts, we've got other people. Why don't we use the facilities we've got? So officers, staff, part of the discussion going on is how do we keep this as lean as we possibly can and do it through the structures we've already got? You don't need, and because we've not got a mayor, there isn't the same political piece as well. You don't need that massive infrastructure when it's stuff that we do already. We can deliver this within our existing thing. Now, government's got a few views on that. They want to have some kind of identity and they want it to be special, and we've seen that. But actually, I think we're leaders and members in particular at the county and district level, I think are keen to keep it as lean as we possibly can. Partly because we already do transport, housing, skills, economic development, community development, and we're quite good at it. Why would we need a whole new sort of structure and building to do it all in? That's where we are today. You know, we're on day one. This is something that's going to be going on for a long time once we get going. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Reflecting that difference that we are in Devon, going ahead for this combined authority approach as opposed to the mayor, we're kind of setting the pace of how this can be done differently potentially, aren't we?
Yeah, hopefully.
I'm just going to take a question from the chat before I bring in other people who've got their hands up. Phil from Newton Abbott has asked, are all the principal councils in Devon involved, signed up? Are they all in agreement?
At the moment, yeah, all of those that will be on the face of the agreement, we are discussing, and Phil will know, with each of the district leaders, with each of the district chief execs, with each of the unitary partners, and with Devon. Everybody will get a chance to have their say. It will be up for individual leaders to decide whether they want to support it or not. I'll say it on the record, and I'm happy to say it, and you may have heard it from your members locally. Everybody's got their own view. There are some leaders that have got a view about where does this get us? How much further does it get us? They're not opposed, but they are waiting to see the detail. That's fine. And we've said absolutely. I think as we get into the consultation, it'll be an opportunity for people to put their view across. So on the principal councils at the moment, nobody has publicly said we are not supporting this. Nobody has said we're not going to push it. I do think there's various people around the room waiting to see where the value is in it. And I get that. And there are some politics with a big P around this, as we all know. I think as we get into the consultation, some of that debate will happen. But we'll see where we get to. What I would say is that we have worked very closely with the district councils in particular around this one. Phil Bialik and the team in Exeter and one or two of the other leaders have been involved in the detail. They've been very supportive and actually have been strong voices. And Cara, you've been in the room where we've had these discussions around trying to move this forward because, and it's a difficult one to talk about, local government reorganisation is something that's floated around for all of us for 25 years. We don't want to go down that pathway, most of us. There are differences of opinion even there. I think there is a view from many leaders that actually sensible partnership working is better than being forced into the position that maybe Somerset have found themselves in, where they've been forced along another route. So just to give you a feel for the kind of debates that happen around Devo. But yeah, it's a really interesting question. At the moment, yeah, we will see what happens in consultation. Everything is on the table and it's for people to decide, really.
Thanks, Phil. The next question is from Glyn Richards.
Good morning, all. I'm Glyn Richards from South Brent Parish Council. Taking a bottom-up view, the ratepayers would be greatly concerned about future funding and the guarantees that come with that, given the history of successive governments in cutting funding in devolution.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to say that's something we're concerned about as well. So what the areas that we're taking on and the balance of powers, I'm going to be careful how I say this because I don't want to go into too much of the detail about what might get announced, but we are taking on things that have either got a permanent budget, and by permanent I mean it's about as permanent as you can get within any government, as we all know, because there's always risk there, or they're things that we think are so fundamentally important for the local area that actually that risk about funding is worth taking on as counties, because it's worth it in terms of the benefit that we get for the local community. I mean, the obvious one is the skills piece. The skills piece is actually funded for about 5 years because they're forward settlements. So that's about as much certainty as you ever get from a government. The discussion that was had with leaders around that one, for example, was that, yes, there is some risk that you might see the funding fluctuate and we end up with a responsibility. But actually, is it right that the local area has responsibility over some of the adult skills piece? And the judgment that's been made, and this will be part of the consultation, so it's a question for us all, is we think it is important that we've got more control over that fund. You know, it makes sense that the local area does control adult skills and how we do certain things. Now, everybody will have a different view, and that's why the consultation is so important. But I think leaders at the moment, and the discussions we've been having, is there is a bit of risk and reward in this, as there is in Manchester and Birmingham and everywhere else. I think the view across around the table at the minute is there's probably more reward and more benefits for us having control over our own destiny, rather than where we are at the moment, which is we just get things inflicted on us by Whitehall. And that's the kind of balance. And it is a difficult decision to make, but I think that's where they've landed as of today.
Will that be clarified in the consultation process to the ratepayers of how big those risks are?
Yeah, I mean, basically, so the consultation document will set out what powers come down. I mean, in terms of ratepayers, this at the moment is zero base. So there's no costs coming from councils to pay for it. It's all coming from government. I think as part of that, we will be taking on responsibility for these funds. And we need to understand that we're taking on responsibility for these funds. If you mean, can we give an absolute risk analysis of where we think those funds are going to be in 20 years' time? No, because genuinely, I think, and this is always the challenge with it, it's that, the question for people will be, would you prefer to be in charge of these things? We know what we're going to get over the next few years, but can we guarantee that a Conservative, Labour or Lib Dem or Green administration, I'll go through the whole gang, or some of the others, are going in 20 years' time to stick to the funding agreement that we've got today? Well, no. But what we can say is we know what we're getting and we're going in with our eyes open on the first round.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question is from Ray Bloxham.
Hello, I'm a councillor from Cranbrook Town Council, same as Janine. I'm sort of picking up on a few points that you've made, Phil. And I was also going to ask the same question actually as the clerk in Newton Abbot about our principal councils in Devon signed up. And I got from your answer from that question that probably not at the moment, fully, because they're probably still waiting to see what's going to happen. And you also said when you were talking about the Shared Prosperity Fund, for example, depends on your district. That was the words you used. So my view is, and I'm concerned about how districts will respond to this and how districts will actually operate a devolved deal for Devon, and what impact that will have on ourselves at town and parish council level. Yeah. Will we see a difference? Will we have some control over that difference, or will we be kind of wagged by the district councils and their attitude towards this new arrangement?
I think I have to be slightly careful about this one because it's an interesting one for us. District relationships with their town and parish councils change, and they even change within districts, as we all know. Let's take SPF, because SPF is a really interesting one. In some areas, districts have chosen to do it as a bottom-up approach because of the way that they operate as a district council. In some areas, they haven't, and that's very changeable. And that's been for individual districts to decide. I think where we're getting to with the devolution piece is certain things will be done at the county combined authority level, and it may be different from the way that they're done now, because we're seeing a difference. You'll be working with a different set of partners. I mean, on the district thing about agreement, they are all signed up in principle to pursuing a devolution deal. I think that the way it's been worded, and I'm going to be careful how I say this, is everybody is comfortable to agree a deal. Everybody is comfortable to get to the point where we've got a deal on the table. I think every council has then reserved the right, including the county council, to decide whether or not it's a good deal for Devon. And I think that's probably the right way to do it. Everybody will have to decide whether it's worth doing. I'm not here to sell a deal, although I sort of am, because I spent 18 months of my life on it, so I sort of have to. But I think what we're saying is there will be a deal, it will be an offer, and we'll have a consultation process where people will be able to respond to it. Districts at that point we'll have to make a decision one way or the other. At the moment, everybody's gone with it. Everybody's been comfortable. Every leader has said we will go with it. But I think we are reaching that critical point where everybody will have the next bit. The thing that's probably important to say is the Act, and it's in writing, so I'm not saying anything that's not in there, doesn't require everybody to agree it to go forward. What they require is for us to have a majority in favour, because you're never going to get 100% support. What that means in practice, the counter to that is John Hart has said publicly he would prefer to be in a position where all the partners are on side and where we're all doing this together, because you don't start a partnership with one of the partners off to one side, then it won't be involved. But we know that we're coming up to a crucial time. Next year has got a few big events which may put a certain flavour on it. But I think, Councillor Boxwood, going back to your original point, I think that one of the things we've got to work on is how this is going to work between local, district and county and the new CA. You know, you make a really, really good point, which is it's got, you know, this has got to work. And we know at times it doesn't work. But it's, you know, we've just got to be a little bit careful, because we've all coming into this with relationships, existing relationships with our districts, with our county, with other people. And I can already see this is going to be a bit of work over the next 3 or 4 years. How does this all fit together and how do we all work together on it? But yeah, sorry, I can't give you a definitive answer because that is a big question for us, but I know what you mean. Absolutely.
And we've got another question from Phill at Newton Abbot.
Yeah, thank you, Phill, for putting yourself in front of us like this. You must be a very brave man. Couple of things really, and to use your words, yes, the cynic will say that you are rearranging the deck chairs, and potentially you're just swerving reorganisation. The turkeys aren't voting for Christmas. They don't want a unitary authority. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's what the cynics are going to be saying. What concerns me and what I would like to know is there's already problems for the county and the district. I mean, Cambridge District Council has made it publicly clear that in 2 years' time they've got an enormous hole in their budgets. You're talking between 2 and 4 million. Therefore, they are already considering, and this has been mentioned this morning, dumping services, not necessarily on us, but just dumping them. And the parish and town councils are going to have to decide whether they take them up or not. Equally so, and we heard this directly from your chief executive at the conference, you as a county council have huge challenges out there, not least children and adult social services, education. I mean, I've been in this county since 2007, and I remember Councillor Hart wringing his hands and complaining that the pupils in Devon per head have less spent on them than anywhere else in the country. That's not changed. Here we are 16, 17 years later, it's not changed. So what concerns me is, and I understand that this is, you know, nice new deal and everything, how on earth are you going to be able to deal with all these new services as much as they will come with funding when the districts and the county are struggling already?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, on a day-to-day basis, and as a member of the team that's working around some of those challenges, which Don has talked about in public, it's not easy. And I think there's a difficult discussion and a difficult set of decisions. So we've had some very mature conversations about that, because being blunt, it's something that we worry about as well. I think the view has been, and the view politically and from an officer level, that actually some of the challenges that we've had over the last 20 years are because we haven't had enough control over our own local destiny. And that on some of these things, it goes back to the discussion we've just had, there's a trade-off about, is it better that we have them and then have to work out how we deal with them, rather than not having them and having solutions imposed on us. And there's a couple of things on that list. I mean, housing being the obvious one, but there's a couple of other things, the local development, economic development piece, where, yeah, it is going to put some additional pressure on resources for us. The money comes down from government, and we'll have to work out how we're going to spend that. But I think the view has been amongst officers and leaders, is it a risk worth taking? And the view has been yes, because the amount of work that we have to do at the minute around those things, even though we've got no control over them, it's not the best way to put it. it can't be any more than where we are today. You know, fundamentally, day in, day out, we are having to deal with these things, and we have no control over the base budgets. We have no control over the administration. We are having to deal with the consequences of decisions made in Whitehall that create massive barriers for us in terms of local delivery and in terms of burden. I mean, one classic one is the housing piece. The housing piece, you know, some of the rural housing stuff that we can't do because we haven't got control over some of that investment, you know, is huge for us as Devon. We all know the situation. I think the feeling is that, yeah, it is an additional burden. Yes, we have got a lot on. Yes, every council in the country, and I've been with LGA colleagues over the last few days, is facing challenges. But is it better that we've got control over our own destiny? I think that's where they've got to. It's a very difficult balancing act to take forward, but I think where we've got to is it's better that we're in that position than the alternative, which is we are done on too. And the nervousness around this is, particularly with devolution, other areas are moving at pace. If we are not part of that group, what does it look like for those who are left behind? And I think that's going to be a very difficult sort of balancing act for other authorities over the next few years. So I've been honest, I don't think there's a perfect answer to it. You're absolutely right. I mean, as somebody who's working with the council's budget challenges, not just ours, but across all of the authorities, because this isn't just Devon, it's, you know, we work with everyone. It's not a comfortable time, but if not now, when? And if not us, who else? And that's sort of where we are a little bit.
To add what Phil's saying there is, I think one of the examples that really made it hit home for me when we were talking about it in Team Devon is recognising that our districts at the moment are currently competing against each other for small pots of money against everybody else in the country. And quite often, because there's not enough money to go around, don't get anything. Yeah. And there's a lot of work involved in that. And at least with a devolution deal, we'll have some funding secured locally and some control where it makes it slightly less competitive against each other. Obviously priorities and stuff will have to be determined, and there'll still be winners and losers to some degree, but we're not competing with as many people. And we've got a little bit more control. And once you're kind of in and got your foot in the door with getting something, you tend to have more doors open for you for extra bits and pieces, don't you? So extra funding, extra things from time to time, and that's where the advantage, and that's where the shift in all the workload kind of going to happen. If I reflected that right, Phil.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Karen. You put it much more succinctly than I can. It is that difficult balancing act, but actually it's almost that you're in a smaller pond with guaranteed resources as opposed to being in a big pond where we never know day to day what we're going to get. That's it at the heart. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment, so I'm going to pose a question to you, Phil. Is there any questions or asks of us that would be useful for you to get a gauge of feeling on, or even if it's just a show of hands around the room, actually, if we're all supportive of the direction of travel that you're going in?
I mean, it'd be interesting to get people's views. I've got to say, I am not pro or anti. We are purely neutral at the moment, although, as I say, I've got a bit of a personal thing, but it'd be interesting just to get a show of hands whether people would be supportive of the idea of bringing stuff down from the centre.
So over to you guys. Can you use your raise hand icon or wave at the screen if that's easier for you, just to indicate, are you supportive of the direction of travel we're currently going in?
Interesting.
Hand off.
Yeah, I've got a few hands up.
That's great.
I'm not going to take everyone who hasn't got their hand up as being actively against, because there might be a few people there that are unable to do it. But that's interesting just in itself.
Sorry, could I just say something? I have been raising my hand, but it's actually been put up at the wrong time. I'm Lisa Gowdy from Cranbrook Town Council. So yeah, I do have a question if you're permitted.
Yeah, no problem. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you. Yes, could you tell me when and how the devolution deal will be consulted with residents? How is this going to be explained to the public? Because people are not aware of the devolution itself. They don't really actually know what it actually how it actually entails. And how will this be consulted with the public? And also 1% of councils have produced an audit in 5 years. How can you be so confident about finance in this situation?
Yeah, okay. I mean, on the consultation piece, so it'll be a public consultation process that gets formally launched, and you won't miss it, hopefully, probably in January time. We are just waiting on some dates. It will go to councils across the area as well, and we'll be doing a range of public events. There'll be websites, there'll be communications, there'll be a whole range of stuff. To give you a feel, the Act requires us to do a full public consultation, and it's got to be evidence that we've been out and done sufficient amounts of consultation before we come back with a response. So it's not, you know, it will get done in a certain way. Just on basics, we're currently working on a website, we're currently working on the comms, we're currently working on communications to come back through the key partners, and that'll include DALC, the network, and others. And we'll be out doing roadshows and bits and pieces during that 6 to 8 week period, because we've got a statutory period that we have to meet. So that one's a bit more straightforward. Actually, it will be a proper public consultation. We can't get away with just putting it on a side show and just going, oh yes, you've had 8 weeks. This will be something that you'll be hearing about as a bit of pre-warning. On the finance piece, I mean, I go back to the other piece. Yes, there are challenges around the local government sector at the moment, as we all know. Every council is under some pressure. Every council is working through that piece. On the audit side, I won't go into details, but yeah, obviously it's been in the press over the last few weeks, and I know that the public is concerned about it. We're all working through our own situation. It's probably not appropriate entirely, but clearly we would like to have a bit more resource, because we're all struggling with the amount of resource that we've got, but we are where we are and we're all working through what we can. As Devon County Council, we've been very clear on what we're doing. Other councils have been as well over the last few weeks. But yeah, local government at the moment is a tough place to be, you know, being honest.
I hope that's answered your question, Lisa. Again, I'm not seeing any more. Oh, we've got another hand coming up, Liz.
Are we actually a trailblazer in this? Is there another county or grouping that is at this stage of going for a combined authority without a mayor?
So we are going to be, I think, Liz, and don't take my word for this, because this is as of today. I think we'll get announced alongside 4. So I think the 4 will be, and I'll probably get shot for saying this, I think it'll be Lancashire, Cornwall, and Lincolnshire. I don't know whether Lincolnshire is actually going to have a mayor. There's a pack that, and this is stuff that others around the country know, that are sort of working towards this non-mayoral authority. But we will be the trailblazers. There'll be 3 or 4 areas that will come forward as the first ones without a mayor. And yeah, and Devon will be one of the first ones. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. It just makes it, it just throws a lot of responsibility on those 4 to make it work, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It'd be interesting to have some chats with Cornwall. Yeah, okay. That makes me even more determined to make sure that towns and parishes are not thrown into competition for funding like districts and counties have been thrown into competition for funding. In many ways, some of the things you said about your position as a county related to Whitehall echoes absolutely what we say about our position related to the higher authorities. So we share your pain, but definitely looking for better solutions going forward.
Yeah. 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 Having worked at every level, I know what you mean. But yeah.
Okay, so I feel like we're drawing to a natural close of this session now. So I want to just take a moment to really extend my thanks to Phill for giving up his time today to go through the details that he has and to be able to answer your questions, some of which were quite challenging, and you managed very tactfully, Phill. So well done. And I want to reiterate to everyone, this isn't the end of the conversation. This has been ongoing for ages and it's going to continue ongoing, and you've got a public consultation to coming up, and there will be definitely further opportunities to discuss how you can influence DALC's role in any future government of this new combined authority as well. So lots more conversations to come.
Sorry, could I just speak? I was muted just before I finished asking a question. It was just really regarding I'm concerned about the method of consultation, as it's a serious change in the system. Would it be possible to send paper format? That's all I need to ask, really.
Yeah, and I'll take that back to the comms team. That's fine, and actually really useful feedback. If you are concerned about it, we'll find some way to do that, and we'll pick that up with the comms team as we go through. That'd be good.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, so if anybody's got any questions, comments, or anything following from today's sessions, please drop me a line, and I can make sure I can collate those and pass them on to Phill and the team for consideration. But I say there will be further opportunities to come. So for now, I just want to say thank you to everyone for participating. I hope you found it useful, and I look forward to seeing you again at another event soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.